By the time the armies gathered for the Gazala battles in 1942, the Desert War had become a testing ground for machines that were evolving faster than many armies could fully absorb them. British crews were receiving American-built Grant tanks. Anti-tank units were beginning to use the more powerful 6-pounder gun, and Axis formations still relied on a mix of German Panzers, Italian armor, and a deadly system of anti-tank weapons. It is tempting to tell this as a simple contest between tank models, as if the battle can be reduced to which gun fired farther or which armor plate was thicker. Gazala proved something more important. Machines mattered enormously, but what mattered most was how tanks, guns, infantry, engineers, artillery, reconnaissance, and command systems were combined under pressure. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. The British Army in the desert had learned hard lessons from earlier encounters with German armored formations. Many British cruiser tanks were fast, but speed alone did not make them effective in a battle where enemy guns, dust, breakdowns, and poor coordination could strip away their advantages. Earlier British tanks often lacked the combination of protection, reliability, and hitting power that crews wanted when facing German armor and well-sighted anti-tank guns. The arrival of the Grant gave British armored units a badly needed improvement. It was not a perfect tank, and no serious crewman would have mistaken it for a miracle weapon, but it gave the Eighth Army a heavier punch than many of its earlier desert machines. The Grant was the British version of the American M3 medium tank, adapted with a turret arrangement preferred by British requirements. Its most important feature in desert combat was the 75mm gun mounted in the hull, which could fire useful high-explosive shells as well as armor-piercing rounds. That mattered because desert tank fighting was not only tank against tank. Crews had to engage anti-tank guns, infantry positions, trucks, and strongpoints, and a gun that could throw an effective high-explosive shell gave them more options. The Grant also carried a smaller turret gun, creating an unusual layout that looked awkward but gave British crews firepower they had often lacked. The Grant's weaknesses were just as real. The hull-mounted main gun had limited traverse, meaning the driver often had to help aim the tank by turning the whole vehicle. Its high silhouette made it easier to see and hit in the open desert. The layout was complicated, and the crew had to work hard to coordinate all the weapons inside a cramped steel box. Yet in the hands of trained crews, the Grant could be a formidable presence. It could reach out farther than many earlier British tanks, hit harder against German and Italian vehicles, and use high explosive against the anti-tank guns that had so often punished British armored attacks. The 6-pounder anti-tank gun represented another important shift. Earlier 2-pounder guns had been useful in earlier phases of the war, but by 1942 they were increasingly inadequate against improved enemy armor and battlefield conditions. The 6-pounder gave British anti-tank units a stronger weapon with better penetration and more confidence against Axis tanks. It also helped strengthen the defended boxes along the Gazala line, where infantry positions needed the ability to stop or at least blunt armored attack. A box without serious anti-tank power was a target. A box with well-sighted anti-tank guns, mines, artillery support, and determined infantry could become a serious obstacle. But the 6-pounder was not a magic answer either. Anti-tank guns had to be placed correctly, concealed, supplied with ammunition, and protected from artillery, aircraft, and infantry assault. A gun that was dangerous from the front could be outflanked if the enemy found a way around the position. Crews had to hold fire until targets came into effective range, and that demanded discipline under terrifying pressure. Guns also had to be moved, and in the desert, moving them under fire was difficult. The 6-pounder gave the British more lethality, but lethality only counted when the gun was where the battle needed it to be. On the Axis side, German Panzer units brought a different kind of strength. The Panzer III and Panzer IV were not invincible machines, and they were not always superior in every technical category to what the British could field. Their advantage often came from how they were used within a fighting system. German armored units tended to work closely with reconnaissance elements, anti-tank guns, artillery, and radio communications. When British tanks charged forward without enough infantry, artillery, or reconnaissance support, they could be drawn into prepared killing zones. The Panzers might begin the fight, but it was often the anti-tank guns behind or beside them that delivered the decisive punishment. This is one of the central lessons of Gazala. German armored warfare in the desert did not mean tanks simply racing ahead and winning by themselves. Axis forces were skilled at creating combined defensive and offensive traps. Panzers could lure British armor forward, then fall back or maneuver, while anti-tank guns opened fire from concealed or prepared positions. The famous 88mm gun, originally an anti-aircraft weapon, could be devastating in the anti-tank role, but it was only one part of a wider method. Smaller anti-tank guns, artillery, mines, and disciplined fire control all contributed to the same effect, breaking up British armor attacks before they could concentrate.
Italiane forze osso riservano maggiore attenzione delle sometimes ricevono in semplificate versioni del Desert War. Italiani armori erano spesso tecnicamente outclassed da British e German equipment, e italiane formazioni soffrivano di molte sciortegie e weaknessi. Ma italiane unit non erano irrilevanti. Ad Gazala, formazioni quali Ariete pleirono ruoli importanti nell'asse plano, specialmente nella Southern Sweep e nella fighting attorno a Bir Hakeim. Italiani truppi operavano artiglieria, anti-tank gun, track e infantry posizioni che formavano parte dell'asse Battlefield System. La battaglia non era combattuta da German Tank alone, e Rommel's Army era sempre una coalizione forza, con tutte le forze e le complicazioni che implicava.
The British challenge was to turn improved equipment into improved battlefield performance. Grants and six-pounders gave them tools they had badly needed, but those tools had to be coordinated across a scattered and confusing battlefield. British armored brigades still had a tendency to fight in separated actions, sometimes advancing without enough infantry or artillery support. Tank crews could find themselves engaging panzers while being hit by anti-tank guns they had not seen. The open desert seemed to promise freedom of movement, but it also exposed every mistake in timing. If armor, guns, and command decisions did not come together, better machines could still be wasted in costly fragments. The Axis challenge was different. Rommel's forces were dangerous because they were tactically flexible, but they were also constrained by supply, maintenance, and replacement shortages. German and Italian tanks could not be risked casually because losses were difficult to replace. Their anti-tank system helped compensate for this by allowing Axis forces to destroy British armor without always committing panzers to direct tank duels. This was a practical method, not merely a clever one. It preserved scarce armored strength while forcing the British to spend theirs. In a campaign where every tank lost or broken down mattered, the ability to destroy enemy armor efficiently had operational consequences far beyond the immediate battlefield. Tank crews on both sides fought inside an environment that punished men as much as machinery. The heat inside a closed vehicle could be suffocating, and dust entered engines, weapons, optics, mouths, and eyes. Visibility could collapse when vehicles moved, shells burst, or the wind rose across the desert floor. Commanders had to make decisions while looking through narrow vision ports or standing exposed in turrets. A tank that seemed powerful in a diagram became a vulnerable workplace when tracks broke, engines overheated, radios failed, or enemy fire found the range. The desert turned mechanical reliability and crew endurance into combat qualities, not background details. This is why Gazala should not be remembered as a simple duel between the Grant and the Panzer. The Grant mattered because it gave the British more firepower and a better chance in long desert engagements. The 6-pounder mattered because it strengthened the anti-tank defense of boxes and mobile units. The Panzers mattered because they formed the mobile core of Rommel's striking power. But the decisive issue was the system around each weapon. A tank supported by reconnaissance, artillery, engineers, supply vehicles, repair teams, and clear orders was a weapon of maneuver. A tank thrown forward without that support could become a burning landmark in the sand. The machines at Gazala marked a transition in armored warfare. The British were improving their equipment and learning, painfully, that tanks had to be part of an integrated battle rather than separate cavalry charges across open ground. The Axis showed how armor and anti-tank defenses could work together to seize initiative, absorb counterattack, and punish an enemy who attacked in pieces. Neither side had solved every problem, and both remained vulnerable to logistics, confusion, and command friction. But the lessons were becoming sharper. Modern armored warfare was not about the best tank in isolation. It was about the force that could find the enemy, fix him, strike him, supply the strike, recover from damage, and repeat the process before the other side understood how much the battle had changed.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.